And then salt, we think, what's salt? And you can change, like I've got this thing in our house called Bragg's amino acids. It's a salt substitute. It's like soy sauce, but it's healthy. You get it at Whole Foods. And you put that on, I'm telling you, I can get my kids to eat broccoli and all kinds of stuff they would never touch by putting a little salt on it.
Chocolate works the same way, though.
Chocolate. What about chocolate? Well, they actually have that now. A lot of these food bars are dark chocolate and sea salt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
so
right. That's right.
those are good sellers. So anyway, but salt really brings it flavor. So light draws you in, and then the salt brings it flavor. And so that's how we're supposed to be. That's how we're supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be that person that is like that, salt and light.
Absolutely. And salt even goes further than that because they would pound salt into their meat in Jesus' day to preserve it. So they knew things would last when it was encaked with salt and so forth. So the Bible, the Word of God dwelling in us, makes us last, and we can make other people last by giving them the Word of God. And then when they were done with the salt, it loses its flavor. They throw it out on the street just for traction, just like they do up north and so forth, and it gets trampled underfoot. So he's saying, if you keep your flavor and you be a light and everything, then you're useful and good. But if you don't, then you're to be thrown on the ground and trampled underfoot. I mean, it's quite a big difference between being useful for the kingdom and just trying to be useful for yourself.
Okay, do you remember when you were a new believer? And I don't know, I was listening to you guys' show on the way over here, but I don't know that you've ever touched on your testimony on this show. But when did you get saved?
Early 20s.
Early 20s. And was it a radical transformation? Was it kind of you eased into it? Was it a family thing? What was it?
I eased into it. I grew up Catholic, and my dad was going to be a priest. He was studying to be a priest, so he was studying to be a priest till he met my mom, and then he decided to get married. And so he led me in Bible study as a kid and gave me a big picture Bible, and I still remember some of those pictures in my mind.
How
and
old
everything. Were you? That was growing up, from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and
I thought you were like 20s and your dad gave you a picture Bible.
Yeah.
Look, Bill.
Yeah, those are your...
Showing in the fish.
Yeah. And actually he did, because he gave me this beautiful Bible with great art. I mean, like pictures of very expensive artwork from some of the stories, and it's really magnificent. And if he's listening, I still look at it. If he's not listening, then the truth is I lost it. I don't know where it is right now. But
I would kill to have my family Bible. I don't know where it is either. I don't know if my brother or sister has it, but it was we grew up in a Catholic household as well. Yeah. And it was, the Bible was kept on the coffee table, and, you didn't dare touch it. And if you did, it was like, what are you doing? Don't touch that book. That's the Bible. Don't you know? We don't touch that.
And meanwhile, your Bible's held together by duct tape over here,
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll go through this real quick. My radical, I had a radical transformation. I was in the first team of the heathen, the heathen players there. And when I got saved, I was so exuberant, and I grew up in the Catholic faith. And I was telling my son on the way over here, Jackson's going on a missions trip to Mexico with the Pierce group from Boca, in July. And he's got to raise his own money, and so he's going. I picked him up from training, and I said, "What'd you guys do today for training?" He said, "Well, we're learning how to do street evangelism." I said, "So what'd you do? Did you go today?" And he goes, "No, I didn't go, but." I said, well, let's talk about some conversation starters. I said, here's what you're going to run into, probably Mexico. You're going to run into secular people, obviously, a lot of Catholicism, and probably like here, a lot of people, when pressed, they don't really know the standard doctrines of their faith. You're going to run into maybe some Jehovah's Witnesses, some Mormons. As I say, in the back of your Bible, keep like one or two scriptures or one or two points where you can break the ice in that, as to what they are professing to believe. And I said about Catholicism, I said, that when I talk to a Catholic person, one of the things I use is I said, "Hey, how do you deal with that whole thing about Muslims being saved?" Because that's what the church teaches, right? And they say, "Well, what are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, in the Catechism, number 841, because they're instead of chapter and verse, they just give you a number. Number 841 says it's about salvation. It says, and then concerning the doctrine of salvation, in the first place of those outside of our faith are the Muslims who believe in the one true merciful God just as we do and adore that God and therefore experience salvation as we do." And I'm like, and if you're a Catholic, you read that and go, that's not really there, is it? And then you look at the Catholic apologetic sites and they're trying to explain it away. So I just use that as an icebreaker, as an attention getter. Yeah. So, but I didn't do that with my parents because and again we grew up Easter, Christmas, baptism, funerals, and baby baptisms. Or was that? Did I say them all? It was 5 things anyway. That's what we did. Went to CCD when you're 13, then you never went back again. And that's what most of my family was. But I was so exuberant when I got saved, and I was looking into, okay, what does my family believe? And I start looking at a lot of these things from a lot of Dave Hunt and a lot of these guys who are really exposing the doctrine there. And I went and blasted my family. Let me tell you, you guys are going to hell because you believe this, and they're like, that wasn't really salt and light.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people I blew out of the water. I mean, I'm telling my friends, get in the van, you got to hear this. Come to church with me. This guy's cool, and he's an articulate speaker, and we don't have to go to hell. And it didn't work so well. I mean, people got saved at the bar I worked at, but back to salt and light. There's a way that you share your faith, and there's a way you don't. And your experience now, you're with students all day, most of the day, and obviously there's families and there's graduates, and there's a lot of graduates come back right now. I'm sure a lot of them are coming to see you. What's your experience, your daily experience when you're dealing with people with issues, as far as sharing the faith, and a lot of these people are churched that you're dealing with?
Yeah.
Okay, sharing now you're sharing the gospel in a new way. What's the touch point? What's the thing where it grabs or arrests someone's attention where they're ready and willing to receive it?
Yeah, I mean, always for me, the first touch point is when I'm talking to anybody, especially an unbeliever, is what do you think happens when you die? Because now I'm not talking religion. I'm just talking human fact. I mean, nobody is under the false illusion that they're going to live forever. Everybody knows there's going to be a day when they actually pass away. So just out of matter of curiosity, I always suggest you say, what do you think happens then? When and hear their answer. And
So, hi, how's it going? What happens when you die?
No, I don't even say, hi, how you doing? I just, no, it's just, you've done this. You've brought kids to college campuses, hung out in a common area around picnic tables, and just walk up and say, and honestly, I mean, I don't mind saying this, but a lot of times we're not even totally honest what we're doing there. We just, say, hey, we're taking a survey no, we're not, we're actually not, but we don't want to freak you out by asking you these questions. So
we're evangelizing. Will you talk to us?
Yes. We're trying to keep you out of hell, sir. Can you please give us a minute of your time? But we'll say, hey, we're taking a survey, and we just want to know, what do you think happens when you die? And what's fascinating is nobody thinks anything bad's going to happen. And one of the first things I teach students is a law called Pascal's wager. And Pascal's wager is by Blaise Pascal. I believe he lived in the 1600s. And he simply put it...
Father Mathematics, modern mathematics?
Modern mathematics. And he simply said how because atheism can never achieve 100% certainty, you can never possibly know that there's no God, because... what if suddenly what if the whole world thought he didn't exist and then suddenly he showed up? Then everybody'd be wrong. So you can't ever be 100% certain. That
This was logic and philosophy at work in his brain. Yeah,
absolutely.
Now, he was a Christian, obviously, but very smart man. You can't look in. The atheists now say, well, there's not. Christians are out to lunch and they're insane or whatever. It's like, hey, the fathers of every branch of science except for 2, and the father of mathematics and other kind of they were Christians, and they were doing their work to glorify God and show His glory.
Yeah, and even Einstein's work took him out of agnosticism into theism.
Yeah.
So I mean, the greatest minds ever acknowledged that there has to be a God.
So anyway, go ahead back to Pascal's wager.
Yeah, so Pascal's wager, the long of the short of it just says this, that if the atheist is right, then nothing will happen when he dies. If he's wrong,
he loses everything. Loses everything.
So, but if the Christian is right about what he believes, he'll go to heaven and joy and happiness. And if he's wrong, then nothing happens. So Blaise Pascal says, because you can't have 100% certainty that there is no God, then it's an utterly foolish thing to be an atheist.
It's a bad bet.
Because you just signed up for a package that's terrible. You signed up for the package that says either nothing will happen when I die, or I'll go to hell. Or at least the believer says, here's a package I signed up for. Either nothing happens when I die, or I go to heaven.
And so here's Pascal's wager. And when you talk about a wager, it's a bet, right? Literally, what he's saying is these people are rolling the dice on their eternity.
With no good reason. Because his main point is you have to have 100% certainty to be an atheist, because the consequences of you being wrong are so terrible, so extreme, that the only way you could justify holding that view is to have 100% certainty. So, and it cannot be achieved. So according to Blaise Pascal, atheism is utterly unreasonable. It's just an utterly unreasonable way
Very
to
bad
reason
bet,
and to
yeah.
think. Even if it's 50-50, if it's true, then you're completely crazy for taking that chance on the outcome. But through apologetics, we can see that I would venture to say Christianity, never mind theism, just God being true. I would say the Christian version of God being true, and from all that I've studied, and Eric, I study daily for 25 years now, is it's at least 95% certain. And when you look at fulfilled prophecy, what they were learning in the Old Testament in their synagogues every Saturday, and knowing, hey, we're being promised certain things by God, and then hundreds and hundreds of them coming true in Jesus Christ against astronomical odds of happening. And then when he shows up, public displays of miracles where even his enemies agree that he's working miracles. He announces, I will be killed and I will rise again on the third day. And they're so sure that he said it that they guard the tomb with guards. And even under the
Make
Roman
it as sure
guard,
as you can, he says it.
Even with the Roman guard in front of a tomb, what those guards had to say, Eric, they had to say, we just got the easiest job of our life.
Guarding a dead guy.
We're told to march against strong armies.
Yeah.
Our buddies are out there marching against strong armies. We get our assignment. There's a dead guy. Make sure he doesn't go anywhere. And there's a 2,000-pound stone in front of him and all of that. Just make sure he doesn't go anywhere just for 3 days. Yeah. And they failed. The body's gone. And there'll be nobody that claims the body was there. Everybody agrees the tomb is empty.
By the way, there's a death penalty for a Roman guard losing a prisoner or someone they're supposed to be guarding, and breaking the seal, et cetera. Yeah.
They had every reason to produce a corpse, and they can't.
Yeah. So you're going and talking to people, and you're saying you're asking, what do you think about happens when you die?
Yeah, and so if I'm talking to an atheist, he'll say nothing happens. We just are worm food or whatever they'll say. And you and I grew up Catholic, and we might have a lot of Catholic listeners and so forth. And what concerns me there is their answer will almost always be, I've done more good than I've done bad. Mm-hmm. I'm a good person. Why would God ever send me to hell? Mm-hmm. Look at my life. And
I know I've done some bad things, told some lies, hurt some people, stolen a pencil, and then so I'll go to purgatory. It's this man-made conception where there's I admit I've done some bad things and I should pay some kind of price, but not eternal hell.
Right, and that would be a good conversation too, is the fairness of hell, because a lot of people can't see that either. But yeah, they're going to weigh their good versus their bad, where, and this is why I left Catholicism, is simply because when I read the Bible, I find, how do you explain away Ephesians 2:8-9? You are saved by grace through faith alone, not of works, and nobody can boast. To say I've done more good than bad is boasting. To say I've done more good and bad is to say my works entitle me to heaven. I've earned it. I've deserved it. And Romans 6:23 or 3:23, one of those, says that the wages of your sin is death. Mm-hmm. So as long as you've committed a sin, you've earned and deserved. That's what a wage is, something you earn and deserve. You've earned and you've deserved death. And the very next part of that verse thankfully says, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. Now, in direct opposition to a wage that you earn and deserve is a gift that you haven't earned or deserved. So salvation is a free gift of God given to those who will freely receive it, offered to all on the cross, and it overcomes the fact that God has called you and me to be holy as he is holy. And we already today disqualified ourselves from holiness. We haven't lived a life of loving God with all our heart, loving our neighbors as ourselves. So we need a Savior. And so he wants to give us this gift of eternal life rather than the wages of our sin, which is death.
Now, so you're speaking probably a lot of Christianese to these people. You're sitting, you're talking about sitting next to a college kid on a bench, in a campus, lots of Christianese. What, in those situations, now, yes, I go do those situations. I'm actually doing them more and more, and I used to go do them with different groups of people and church groups and stuff like that. But so I think generally speaking, people are uncomfortable. I mean, and I know, and again, this is just a stat I heard in the Catholic faith. The average Catholic evangelizes, personal evangelism, or invites somebody to church in that sense, once every 23 years. And so, when we label ourselves as evangelicals, meaning we're evangelizing, we're actively sharing the faith. I think that just from experience, I mean, it's the 80-20 rule, the 90-10 rule. Who's sharing their faith? A lot of people they go to church and do their thing, and I'm a good person, I know I'm going to heaven, and then if someone asks me, I'll talk to them, but they're not like looking for situations, or they're not getting in situations where they're actively sharing their faith. How do you, what's your solution for that, Bill? How do you encourage the church? How do we equip the body to do that, to have conversations that count?
Well, first I'd like to point out that, a little saying that convicts me is, as you know, there's 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but I remember reading somebody saying there's actually 5 Gospels. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the believer, and most unbelievers read the believer first and then never want to read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because what they read in the believer. It's like,
so hypocrisy.
Yeah, so it's the hypocrisy and things like that. And then I'm sure this is a quote from somebody really worthy of giving them credit for the quote, but I don't know who it is. But I do know that DC Talk, back in the day, in the 90s when I got into Christian music, they had this quote in front of one of their songs that's rather convicting too. They said, the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, but then walk out the door and deny him by their
heart
lifestyle.
is far from me, like Jesus says. Yeah,
They deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable.
Ravi Zacharias said this one time at a Q&A after an event. Someone said, well, Ravi, he was talking about doubts and that Christians have. And he said, Ravi, what's the thing that causes you the most doubt, that bothers you the most about, Christianity? And he said, it's the lives of believers. He goes, it's, you see these believers, and they're calling themselves Christians publicly, and the things they say and do, and the sin, and it makes the non-believers say, there's no power. There's this Jesus that you claim that lives inside you. Obviously, there's no power in him, and it's troubling to a Christian looking on and saying, why, really, you're doing that again? And yeah, so same thing. It's like it is. You would expect to see the fruit, the fruitful life.
Yeah, and the Bible will say, you've caused the unbeliever to blaspheme God. And you say, how did I cause somebody to blaspheme God? It's for the reason that you just said, Eric. It's because people expect the God follower to have some sort of strength, some sort of difference in their life, and so again, just from my high school teaching, what I tell the kids is that, you go, if you show up at these parties as a Christian and you're smoking and drinking right alongside of them, you don't realize what you're telling them is that what they're seeing in you is this: God, I don't need God, because the person who has God is doing the same things I'm doing. So what difference did God make in their life? So I don't need to get up early Sunday morning and read a Bible and all that, because it made no difference in their life. Now, with the power that God has in our lives, that's blaspheming him. That's saying he's weak and he's not a difference maker. And salvation is no different than damnation, because there's just no difference happening there. So we've talked about salt and light, and it's different from the world. And if you're listening and you're thinking, man, I believe, but I participate in those things. There's in the New Testament they talk about the crown of life, and I just quizzed my kids at the very last class we had this school year. Quizzed my kids on who gets that crown of life, and it talks about the one who receives the crown of life is the one who endures temptation and loves God. And so what I shared was, to have a temptation to sin means you love that sin, because sins you don't love aren't tempting at all. So if you're being tempted by sin, you actually love that sin, but it also says you love God. So you and I and everybody else has been in that boat where we love a sin that's tempting us, yet we love God. Now it says the crown of life goes to those who endure that temptation, which means you let your love of God win in those moments rather than your love of sin win in those moments. So you're there's an old song, "Torn Between Two Lovers." That's this.
Roberta Flack?
I think it might be Roberta Flack. Yeah. So so that's the sense right there. Is I love God, I love the sin, and the sin will offend and hurt God. I might be made happy by the sin for a while, because there's no sin, if we're realistic, makes you happy forever. So there'll be a temporary happiness with the sin, a permanent happiness with God. Do I believe him and his words so much that I gain strength to endure the temptation. And Paul says this, and to them is given the crown of life.
So let's talk about this in the context again. And we're talking about conversations that count. How do you get in these conversations? And obviously, the first one is to live a life that's holy. And in First Peter says, be holy, be set apart, and always be ready to give a defense for those who ask for the reason for the hope that's in you. So the first part of that is, be sanctified, Lord your God. It says in the Greek, sanctify is to be holy, to be set apart. So when we talk about getting someone's attention, earning the right, and I call it earning the right to be heard. That's the way I phrase it. I want to earn the right to be heard. And again, I could have all the knowledge. Again, I'm teaching apologetics right now at my church, and I like the apologetics guys. Sometimes we get, or girls, we get put in this box of, wow, you guys have a lot of knowledge and information, and I'm like, well, thank you for I want half of that credit. I want the other half to be, I live a life of, I'm set apart, and I love people. And that's what's and so with loving people, you serve people. You go out and you do things for people who can't do them for themselves. It's reaching out. It's keeping love bags in the car. It's doing outreaches. It's meeting someone. And when someone's broken, they lose a loved one, and you're the one at the hospital. You're praying for them. You're there with them. You're doing whatever. It's being selfless. And so it's those two parts, that balance. It's the earning the right to be heard, and then when you earn that right, man, you've got something to say. You've got substance. You've done your homework. You're ready for the tough questions. You're ready to clear away the obstacles that get in the way of the cross. People have all kind of obstacles. It's evil and suffering. That hit me personally. It's I don't think Jesus is one of many teachers, great teachers sent from God, and there's all these different arguments that people have heard in movies and songs, and Uncle Joe at Thanksgiving, and they've parroted these things. They've heard them. They've run them over their mind, but they've never really thought them through or had anybody walk them through these things. So earning the right to be heard. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about William Wilberforce for a second. So William Wilberforce, if you don't know who he is, he's really responsible for the end of slavery in Europe and then America as well, as that made its way over here. But Christian man in the government in England, I think 1800s probably, yeah? Sound right? 1600? I don't know.
It all sounds right. I'm not familiar.
He's dead. Anyway, so William Wilberforce, he for I think it was 13 years. It took him. If you see the movie Amazing Grace,
yes.
that song is written about. It was written by his mentor, who was a slave ship captain. And anyway, so the movie's about William Wilberforce's relationship and how his Christian conviction, and he took that to legislation, and it took like 13 years to get slavery ended in England. But here's what they found in William Wilberforce's diary after. He kept his 12-3-1 list, and it didn't say a 12-3-1 list, but in his diaries, he was always. It was said that he spent an hour after dinner every night thinking about who he could share the gospel with, who were the people he was in regular contact with, who he was influencing, and who he could influence, and what he would say. I'm gonna give a book to this person. I'm gonna share a verse with this person. I'm gonna reach out to this person, a way to help them, and he literally planned it out. And you could say, well, that's a little disingenuous, and he was targeting people. Yeah, he's targeting them for salvation.
Yeah.
And so the conversation goes, here's a guy that was serious about his faith, just like a lot of people plan out different things. Like I'm planning my vacation right now. We're going to be gone for 3 weeks, and baby cakes. My to-do list and our packing list with 7 people in a van. Woo, doggy!
Yeah.
You want to come with us? We got 2 seats, Bill.
No.
Empty.
No, my vacation will be avoiding all that.
So we're going to be driving up the East Coast. We're going to be taking the Debunked bus up there and doing some interviews. But the amount of time we're spending packing and preparing the van and making sure everything's, all this preparation, we're setting all these little goals. What about salvation? If that's a big part of our life as believers, don't you? You're waiting for your friends' parents to die before they're, wow, I need something. What's after this? My parents died. I wonder if there really is a heaven. You could be waiting 40 years for that conversation,
Yeah.
So I like to bring the fight, not the Eckerd drug conversation of, now that I'm washed by the blood of the Lamb, but something. There's got to be a normal way to bring this conversation.
You were up in Georgia not too long ago, and you were just, I think, pulled over at a park or something, and you saw Mormons.
Mormons. Yeah.
Tell that story, because that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, this was a funny one, but anyway, so we're at a park and with my kids, and I'm with my wife. And we usually don't go to the park together. I bring the kids there by myself usually, but she was with me, and I said, she saw the Mormons, and she saw me. She goes, I know. And so I walked over. I said, hey guys, what are you doing? you got a few minutes? Can we talk? And we sat down at a picnic table, and I just say, tell me your story. Tell me the story of Mormonism, of Joseph Smith, and I love that because those guys they're doing what we're doing, but I want to hear their story, and so I asked them some pointed questions without it wasn't attacking. It was just, hey, what about this? And you say that when we die we have to be judged by Joseph Smith and Jehovah and Jesus. So where did Jehovah come from, and because there's an infinite regression in Mormonism. It's like you get your own planet, and it's got to stop someplace, and they have no answer for that. And there's a couple of things that they have no answer for, but I just loved on them, and I talked with them, and I challenged them on a few things. And then it's so funny. The next day, we're pulling up to their house, and their house is miles from this park. What are the odds that these two guys were walking up to her parents' house? And they were. And so we invited them inside now, and now we continue the conversation. And you could see the look on their face. I still got these guys' email. And so I know one of them is getting saved. I know one of them will be, because that was two. They looked at me and were like, they're kind of like, something's going on here. Like how? Yeah. So yeah. God placed them at that house. But that's what I will always do that. I mean, you can do that. You can call up the Watchtower Society. They'll send over 2 Jehovah's Witnesses to your house, or to McDonald's. You can meet them there, or you can call the Church of Latter-day Saints. They will send to Mormons to any place you want.
But just make sure you're ready, because they're trained to be convincing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So just make sure you're ready, and you know what you believe and why you believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I'll keep. And I always, like, I'm training my son now, my kids. Like when we go to the beach, we'll see. I mean, literally, there was one day when the Jehovah's Witnesses had one end of the beach over on Atlantic Boulevard, and on the end of that strip where the water fountains are, and then on the other, about 3 blocks down, the Mormons were set up. And he goes, Dad, so we were there to meet somebody, and he's like, Dad, so how do you engage these guys? I said, well, let's go talk to them. And I showed him, and I said, I don't let them control the conversation, because Jehovah's Witnesses are trained. They don't go to church service; they go to trainings every week, and they're trained, and they love talking to Christians, because most Christians don't know their scripture, and they want to get you back on your heels. Well, hey, what do you think about Ezekiel 16:10? What do you think about this? Did you agree with that? Do you agree with that? Do you agree? And they get you thinking, and they finally get you off balance, and they try to sneak one of their so-called truths in. And so I don't let either one of them control the conversation. Right away, when I talk to them, I say, hey, can I see your Bible? Because I know Jehovah's Witnesses have a different Bible. And I say, and I know the verse, they tried to edit the deity of Christ out of there. So I turn to Isaiah 44:24 says, that God created everything by himself. John 1:3 says Jesus created everything by himself. Which one is it? I said, and I don't say it like that. I say, hey, a friend of mine was part of the Watchtower Society, and he read this, and it really bothered him. And I'll say it a couple times, because I want them. I know they're not converting on the spot,
which is true, because Mike, we have a pastor in Boca that came out of the
Watchtower Society.
He was an elder. Mm-hmm. He was well up there, mm-hmm. and had to give up his family pretty much to leave.
Still has. His mother's never seen his.
Yeah, and he's been an amazing pastor, in South Florida, and has got a great youth ministry that your children have been a part of, teaching apologetics and so forth.
I'm sending my kids to Mexico with him.
Yeah. So he's a marvelous example of just knowing the Jehovah's Witnesses story, their arguments, their strategies. They know he's very well trained in going into people's homes and mm-hmm. delivering the Jehovah's Witness doctrine. And you probably know his story better than I do, Eric. But he just came to a knowledge of Christ. He
had one neighbor on one side that was a Christian, and she was loving and selfless, and he had a Jehovah's Witness on the other side of him, and he was Jehovah's Witness. And he just noticed that dichotomy. It was very glaring. Every day when he went home, he would see them both, and he saw the Christian was always loving and peaceful, and then this came up someplace. I think that the Christian shared this with him, and it really rocked his world. He's like, wait a second, how could this be? I mean, there's some more contradictions in their Bible. They missed editing out of the deity of Christ, but and that really got his attention. So it takes you a while. It took him like 10 years. I think it takes the average Jehovah's Witness 10 years to come out of that, because they're so ingrained, and they have your your whole family, so to speak, hostage, because you lose everything. Their family's told to cut you off and disfellowship you, and so Mormons the same way. They're not as aggressive. They're very kind. They're very they have great manners, and they're just very nice people. But you can do the same things for each one of those. But so when I was talking to Jackson, and we're talking about William Wilberforce, how he would he had a strategy, and what are some how do I start a conversation? We go to the family retreat. The first thing they do on the first night, everyone's unpacking. There's new families there. I remember the first time we went to the family retreat, the Hansons, Mike and Cynthia Hanson, were like, "Hey, everyone come out to the main area. We're gonna do an icebreaker." I'm like, "What's an icebreaker? What are you talking about? You got ice out here? What are you doing?" And he was something, he was asking questions in a fun game so people can start to get to know each other for the beginning of the week. Well, I want an icebreaker for evangelistic conversations. Now, what I do now, especially if we're doing debunked, interviews on the street or just talking to anybody. I mean, I love. Wherever we go, I'm always looking for an opportunity. I'm looking for something. Wow, we're at a recital or a lacrosse game, and there's someone else.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something. I'm listening for people. I want to bridge in, and people talk about the issues of life, and they don't necessarily going to reach out and share that with strangers, but if they're talking amongst themselves, and if you can say, hey, I heard. I'm sorry, I'm not listening to everybody. I just heard what you said, and I agree with that, and back off for a while and add another comment. And I really want to get to the four, like you said. You start off with what happens when you die. I love the 4 questions of life. That's what I always use. I mean, there's some other questions I'm going to share here that you can share, to open a conversation. But for me, it's always origin, destiny, meaning, morality. Origin, where do we come from? Hey, where do you think we came from? And like when I do the debunked interviews in the street, I give them the choice. I say, hey, we're already asking people questions about life. So here's the 4 questions. Which one would you like to answer out of these 4? And it's origin. So I'm not saying we're doing a survey. I'm just saying we're asking people other questions like which origin, where do we come from? Destiny, what happens when we die? Where are we going? If any place. Morality, is there such thing as morality? If so, who says so? Who decides what's right and wrong? And origin, destiny, meaning. Does life have meaning? Does life have purpose? And it's an amazing thing. People, they always gravitate to one of them. They've thought about at least we've thought about them all, but usually one is more important to them. And off to the races at that point for me.
Yeah, those are essential questions to talk about because, all of them go towards our identity. I mean, who am I is origins, and why am I here? You got meaning and purpose, and where am I going? Destiny, and everybody has to be concerned about that. I remember sitting with a dad of one of my students, and he was an unbeliever, and his student was just so worried about him. What if my dad dies and all this stuff and he doesn't believe? And I said, well, just challenge him and see if he's willing to come on in and have a conversation, one day. And the dad did. And I was, excuse me, I was laying out, some pretty, some pretty good stuff as far as, hey, what would you say against this? I mean, here's some historical facts. Here's some scientific facts. Here's some philosophical thoughts, and all these different areas I was approaching the truth of Christianity. And his defense was, well, I just don't care. I don't care, type of thing. And I said, well, don't forget that the claim is that there's a heaven and a hell. And so it's hard to believe you don't care about that. It's hard to believe you don't care that you might be in line for suffering.
Very hard to believe.
Yeah. So I said, but he still had the confidence in himself to say, no, I don't care. And so because he had children, I said, well, what if I said to you that when your child walks out the door, I put this very dense, heavy rock balancing on the door. As soon as they open it, it's going to fall on their head and cause a lot of damage. If I said that to you, would you say I don't care, or would you check it out and say, for my child's safety, I'm going to check this out and just make sure that this doesn't happen? And I said, how much more so if I'm sitting here saying I'm rather convinced that not only might you suffer for all eternity, but if you raise your kids this way and they follow you, then your kids are going to suffer for all eternity, and maybe you participated in their damnation by not taking God seriously and checking it out by saying, I don't really care for your whole life. I mean, as a dad, just be a responsible dad and check out the claims of Christianity. Is not like I would want it to be, but it was he wasn't offended by what I said, because the whole conversation, like you said, I want to earn the right to be heard. I think I did that.
Like showing care, yeah.
Yeah. And so he could have been greatly offended when I basically said, you're such a bad dad, your kids could go to hell one day, type of thing. But he instead, it was cordial, and that was their sophomore year. So I still had 2 other years where this dad and I would see each other and say hello and all that. And I can't tell you where he is spiritually today, but I will tell you this, that I can't. It'd be hard for me to believe that he didn't at least consider everything I said, because what I get discouraged on, and people might say I'm overboard with this, but I really don't think so. But I don't like that so few of these conversations get down to what's at stake. It's almost like, hey, we're just having kind of a brainiac conversation. Here's your philosophy, here's mine. Let's see who can win, like an arm wrestling match.
There's consequence.
But sometimes I get frustrated with Christianity, and I want to say, are you really concerned about people that are lost? Because why aren't you talking to them more? And are you really convinced that you're going to heaven? Because sometimes I see you complaining about little things that doesn't look like you make the little things big things. Whereas if you knew you're going to heaven one day, sometimes the little things you just realize are so little. So what? I don't need to fuss over that stuff.
Yeah.
So the Christian ought to be walking in amazing joy and at the same time amazing concern for those that are lost.
Penn Jillette of the famed magician's Penn and Teller, Penn Jillette, he said to Ray Comfort, or about Ray Comfort, that when Ray Comfort gave him a Bible and he had some time with him, he said, you're the one of the first people who's ever actually gone through and shared the gospel. Everyone else although the Christians back away from me because I'm an atheist, I'm vocal about it. And he said, but he goes, I'm really grateful. He goes, thank you for the Bible. I'm really grateful you shared the gospel with me, because if this is what you're saying is true and you're not sharing the gospel, you really hate people. You must not like people. You must hate them. If they're going to hell and you really believe that and you're not saying or doing anything about it, what's wrong with you, Christian?
Yeah, I saw the YouTube video he made after getting that Bible, and he looked a bit dumbfounded. Because, he was like, it's making me realize how many Christians have been in my audience and didn't care, didn't bother to say anything to me and so forth. Well,
especially since he's a vocal atheist. He's not, you don't wonder what he is.
There's no surprise there. And he put it in the terms of, if I saw you walking on the train tracks with earbuds in and you didn't hear a train coming behind you, I would be doing everything in my power to get your attention. I'd be yelling, hollering, screaming, sprinting, ready to tackle you out of the way, all this stuff, because I know a train can do you a lot of damage. You think hell can do me even more damage, and you're not saying anything.
By the way, the Penn Jillettes of the world, Bill Bright from Campus Crusade for Christ, who founded that ministry, and I love that man. He would do a 40-day fast from food every year. Bill Bright.
Yeah.
And so he was the real deal. But he said when his strategy of the Campus Crusade for Christ was they would go after the radical on the campus. They'll go after the Penn Jillette of the campus, knowing that once that he or she was converted, man, you got a weapon, you got an atomic bomb on that campus ready to explode.
Yeah, and that's a lot like Ray Comfort. Ray Comfort, there's a great video. I believe it's called Creation versus Evolution.
Yeah, he goes on the campus. Yeah,
he goes to UCLA. He basically
Academy of Sciences,
goes to their science department and says, give me an example of macroevolution, and every one that they provide, he shows them how it's not, and they get dumbfounded, and as he's doing that, he's out there with the students saying, finding the atheist students and saying, why, what
well,
why don't
they're like, well, because I believe in science, and then he goes, well, give me an example, and none of them could.
None of them.
And by the way, I've done that probably 100 times. Had that conversation with people, and it's usually, Frankie Eric, can you come talk to my friend, my uncle, whatever, my neighbor, my sister, and they when you hear that, when they say, well, I'm a person of reason and science, not faith. And I say, oh, really? So I'm a person of science also. I love reason too. But so like in science, what's the single most piece of compelling evidence in science that convinces you there's no God, that atheism and evolution are true? And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, you said you're a person of reason and science, not a person of faith. So what is like the biggest fact, the thing that really got your attention in science, the scientific fact that says, man, there's no God, evolution's true? And they say, what do you mean? And I say, look, let's do it again. I do it like 3 or 4 times, and I've never gotten an answer. And I've been to UF, I've been to Nova Southeastern, Broward Community College, and done these things at the science departments. Same thing. I'm talking to PhDs and even professors. Same answer. They don't have an answer.
Yeah. Well, one of my students, I was so proud of him at Nova. He's going to Nova Southeastern University. He was there about a couple weeks, and he's texting me how his biology professor had said, if there's any creationists out there, You're gonna have to get that garbage out of your head if you're gonna know real science. And
Just like the movie Expelled, yeah.
yeah, and you actually use the word dumb or something. You're dumb or you're stupid or something if you believe creation. And this is a very bold student. He's very outgoing and talks almost too much, I would say. But he raised his hand and he says, "I believe in creation, and I don't think I'm stupid." And before the professor could say anything, a girl in the class shouted out at him saying, "How could you not believe in evolution? It's just fact." And then he looked at her and said, "Give me one example." And she said something about a butterfly, and it wasn't metamorphosis. It wasn't a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It was something about a butterfly goes through something, and it didn't. And you and I study this stuff, and there's nothing on a butterfly like that.
It's the opposite. Metamorphosis. How does a caterpillar put himself in a cocoon in a chrysalis?
Completely change.
He melts. He literally melts and then forms. How do you explain that evolution? It's a huge argument against evolution.
Yeah, we have a friend that'll great arguments for metamorphosis being only possible through God.
Yeah.
But anyways, whatever she said, he said to her, "So what was it at the beginning of the process you just named?" And she said, "A butterfly." He said, "What was it at the end of the process you just named?" She said, "A butterfly." He says, "That's microevolution. We all believe in microevolution. We all know things adapt to their environments, and but they never become something else. There's zero evidence that they become something else." And
what kind of class was this?
This was biology class.
Okay.
He's a biology professor, and so the professor was fairly young. He said 30s, maybe 40 years old, and was curious about what the student was saying, and had conversations with him. And I don't know how they turned out, but the student would literally take pictures of the homework and send them to me and said, "I'm not even answering these macroevolution questions. I'm actually challenging the question. The question assumes this. Why would it assume this? Where's the evidence for the assumption behind that?"
Me and David were about to, our butterfly friend, we were going to go and register for a class over at FAU, an evolution class, a biology class. And just for the same reason, we don't care about the grade. Let's go take the class, and so we can influence students, get in conversations, talk to teachers. Yeah, that's amazing. So one time over at the Creation Museum, Tom DeRosa, there was our babysitter, Kate Liedersdorf, whose husband's a pastor. She wasn't married at the time, but she was taking the class at FAU called Evolution versus Creation. And you think, oh, they're going to get both sides. They're going to talk about creation, evolution, and let a inquiring mind want to know and decide, right? No, she said it should be called Evolution bashes creation. They had, the textbook was God Delusion and something else. It was, two atheists. And they did one of their assignments, you could write a paper or you could do a field trip to a Creation Museum. And the whole class chose the Creation Museum. Who wants to write a paper? We can go to Creation Museum and do a tour, and and as long as we're there, we get credit. And the whole class came, and she let us know they were coming. They said they were a Jewish group out of Boca Raton that's coming to visit the Creation Museum. That's what they lied and told them that. But so me and David, and I don't know who else was there. Me, David Fine, and Tom had a Harvard professor there who was a Christian, and it was the funniest thing, man. But because and then we did a tour of the museum. He spoke for a little bit, and then the students were like, "I don't understand though. You have all this evidence for, creation, abrupt creation, Cambrian explosion, these type things. This seems like evolution is not true." And meanwhile, their professor and his girlfriend, who was in the philosophy department, neither one of them said a word the whole time. We were there for 2 hours, and so this one guy, the teacher goes, "Well, there's this dig in whatever it's in the Middle East, and there's this bird, and then underneath that, layers underneath it, they found another bird, but it evolved from the same type bird, and it shows evolution, and that's proof." And it was the funniest thing. The Harvard professor goes, "Yeah, I know the site. It's my site. It's my paper, and it's not what you said."
Yeah,
and I mean, it wasn't like
awkward.
The guy goes, "I was there. I saw it." I was the guy like, "Well, I know it's my dig."
Oh, jeez.
And it was. I really felt bad for the atheistic professor because he got just. I mean, the guy wasn't trying to slam, but there's no other way you could say it. I mean, he was there, but.
Yeah.
And so meanwhile, the class it was great because finally the professor's girlfriend blurted out. And Tom just says, "Well, just give me one, and Tom DeRosa, he's the sweetest man alive, right?
Yeah.
He's the most gentle, loving guy." Yeah. And he says, "Well, he's professors, just give me a piece of evidence of evolution." And the professor's girlfriend blurts out, "The hammerhead shark," as if that's caught someplace between, like a shovel and a fish, and the way its head is shaped, and so. And the class was like, you see them rolling their eyes, like, really? You're our professor. That's our biggest thing we got.
At least say a platypus, you know?
Well, that's caught between something. It looks like.
Yeah,
But that's,
yeah.
I mean, that's very specifically. That's a great example of intelligent design and
Sure,
specificity.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I want to give a few things here. These are good conversation starters, and I got this from a guy. Guy's name is Vince Vitale. He's part of RZIM, Rev Zacharias Ministries. Pretty young guy. And he says, if you consistently ask good, meaningful questions, you'll find that Jesus finds his way into the conversation. Here's some of the questions he has. And ready? So, what was the best part of your week? What was the worst part? And we do this at my house at dinner time or at devotion time the other night. One of the two. And we say best part, worst part. After we're done with devotions, and we'll go around the room. Jackson, what's someone will start it, and then they say, what best part of my day was this, worst part of my day was this. And then Zoe, and then he chooses the next person. And it's really, you find out so much about a person. You find out about the people in your own house like that.
Yeah.
We love doing that. That's like one of our favorite things. But you do that with someone else, and you're going to find out something that you didn't know about. Somebody you work with, your neighbor, and ask those kind of things. I hate superficial conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, how are you? Good. How are you? Fine.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
Yeah.
What's been on your mind lately? What was the happiest time in your life? Why? What are you good at? What are your dreams for the future? If money was no object, what would you do with your life? And these are questions that this guy Vince has written out, and he's test-driven them, and he goes over them once a month, and he takes the best ones and uses them more frequently. But these are all questions he's been using over the years, and I use some of these also. I just never made a list about them. I love them. What were you like as a child? What would you do differently? With your childhood. What is your best childhood memory? Whom in your family are you most alike? Who are you most different from? Who you're closest to? Who's your best friend? What's the best thing about them? How would your best friends describe you? Who's had the most significant influence in your life and why? What would you do to change about yourself if you could change one thing? Here's one of my favorites. This is great. Did you grow up in a religious home?
Mm-hmm.
Because you talk to somebody. Hey, I got a question for you. I'm a Christian. I got a question. Did you grow up in a religious home? A, B, C. I don't care what the answer is. You're gonna learn something about this person. No, I didn't. Oh, have you ever heard the gospel before? I remember. I don't know if you know Wally Waiters. Do you know Wally?
No,
So Wally's a guy that when I first started coming to church as a non-believer for a few years, he was a Gator, and I got saved. And I go, it's my first year. I just got saved, and he's like, hey, you want to go to Gator Growl with me? It's the Florida, University of Florida homecoming, and we go to Gator Growl, and we go to the game, and after the game, they have all these. We won the game, and they have all these like parking lot parties where the people with RVs and the what do they call them? What do they call those parties in the parking lots? Tailgates.
Yeah.
But they spend the night and everything else, and they're partying all night. So we would just pick up people that looked like they needed to ride someplace. Hey, you need to ride someplace, and take them there. We'd take them back to the hotel room or the stadium or their friend's apartment, and we'd always just share the gospel with them. And I remember we were in line at a Crystal Burger, and there's a couple guys in front of us that were, they were college guys, and he goes, hey, how's it going, guys? What's going on? Not much. Hey, good game, right? Hey, can I ask you a question? He goes, yeah. He goes, hey, have you ever heard the plan for salvation? And he goes, no. He goes, would you like to hear it? He goes, sure. And I'm watching. I'm going, really? That's what you do? You walk up to someone and say, have you ever heard the plan for salvation? But it wasn't. I've not. It wasn't. I've been washed by the blood of the Lamb. It wasn't that bad. It was
better than the echo drugs.
Dude, he was bold, and I was just like, I watched him in action, and it was just normal for him. I was like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
If you know someone like that, man, hang around them. You'll learn real quick.
Yeah. That's why I like the, and you probably have to have some other conversation before this, but the one thing everybody has in common is there's wonder about death. I mean, you go to memorial service and atheists or anybody alike will say, oh, they're in a better place, and you go, wait a minute, I thought you didn't believe, But when the rubber meets the road, everybody wants to believe. Everybody wants this to be true. Who wouldn't want it to be true? Who wouldn't want there to be
heaven? Nah, it's not for me.
Yeah, happiness, joy, overrated. Yeah. So I mean, so I think people will be less intimidated by these conversations that count if they really perceive the fact that if you get a listening heart, you're going to be providing them the information that's been missing from their life.
Yeah.
There's a hole in their heart. They're filling it with all kinds of worldly things that don't satisfy. They're not content with. It's like, I think it was John D. Rockefeller when asked, he was the richest man in the world at the time, when asked, how much is enough? He said, just a little more. And so it's just this never content way of living. You just gotta keep.
What was Michael Douglas's
wanting.
character in the first Wall Street movie?
I don't know.
Did you ever see it?
I saw it, but I won't remember something.
All
Like
right.
that.
Well, just to let you know,
Yeah.
Bill's never seen The Godfathers 1, 2, or either one of them. Anyway, but I'll think of his name as the show closes. But he says, yeah, in Charlie Sheen in the movie, he says, how many rats do you need to water ski behind? And it was like, how much is enough? And it's like,
Yeah.
there's never enough. So,
It's never enough.
what you said though is like at a funeral, death, it gets their attention. And Ecclesiastes chapter 7 says, better is the day of one's death than the day of one's birth, for the living will take it to heart. And boy, what an opportunity to share the gospel. I love, for me personally, is working in a church and doing funerals and weddings. I like funerals better because of that. I get it. At the wedding, there's a reception. People are happy. It's joyful. It's a lot of fun. Funerals, man, dude, you got people's attention.
Yeah, no, you're right. If I had to witness to somebody unto salvation by the end of the day, I'd say put me in a memorial service, because you have everybody's attention. Everybody's considering, where is that person right now? What exactly are they non-existent? Are they somewhere else? I mean, you have everybody's full attention, and that's all you need for them to consider the truths of the gospel.
Here's another place you can go when you have someone's attention, and Paul over at Calvary, he can attest this. If you just contact him if you like over here. If you're living in South Florida, listen to this, and a believer. Someone in hospice, someone in the hospital just had a heart attack, and their attention is arrested, right?
Yes.
Someone in hospice, they're facing it and they know it, and someone in their family's probably told them already, and you've got someone's attention finally. I found out that I've never been kicked out of a hospital room for that. I've never been kicked out of a hospice room either for that. It's like you're sharing. Now it's acceptable. Okay, I've lived my life. I don't have all the answers. I know I'm close to on the edge of eternity. What you got?
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
attitude.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that wants to share the gospel, have conversations with the account. What a great breeding ground for that kind of getting your feet wet.
And I would hate for people to wait that long, though. I mean, Eric, you and I, been walking this out for quite a while now, and I haven't had a day yet where I go, I'm jealous of the unbelieving world. I'm jealous of the unbeliever and the amount of choices he can make that I won't make nowadays. Why? Because they're chasing the wind. They're going after something that I had, and you certainly had, because you did paganism way better than I did. And yet when it's replaced with a relationship with God, you just don't miss that. You can literally say, I'm not who I used to be. I'm better, and I'm not as good as I'm gonna be, because God continues to work through us, and everybody wants to be known, and everybody wants to be loved. And when you put all of those two things in human relationships, you often get disappointed. But to be known and to be loved by God, and to have that acknowledged every day, just brings a completeness to the heart. And so when you talk about going out and evangelizing and having conversations that count with other people, you literally are delivering a need that everybody has. But it's amazing that as they pursue things other than God, how they can convince themselves that they don't have that need. But it doesn't take much to have their eyes open and their world really to change.
One more of these questions that he had brought up that was I really liked. It was he said, "Have you ever had an experience in your life that made you think there might be a God?" Have you ever had an experience? Because most people have. It's something. They know, they recognize there's something out there. There was a need met. There was a small, I guess there's no such thing as a small miracle, but there was something that got their attention like that. They're like, maybe there is a God. And so what these questions do, they just, by asking questions, opens up the door to conversation, right? You're engaged. You're off to the races. And just by the way, if you've done any homework in this area of the questions of life, of apologetics, you can watch our Debunked videos. These are the fastest, not the fastest. They're pretty fast. It's probably a really fast way to get up to speed, right? You can just text "Stay Bold" STAYBOLD to 51555, and you'll get these debunked videos. We've got about 12 or 13 of them right now. We're putting out about one every 6 weeks, and they really tackle a lot of these core subjects, the things that people say and the questions people ask, and they give really strong biblical, logical, philosophical responses that you can use.
Eric, if somebody wanted to get those questions that you rang off, can you tell them how to get Vince Vitale's
Yeah. Oh,
questions there?
just type in Vince Vitale, and you can type in. I don't know what the name of the talk is actually. I think I might have it on the top here. I named mine different, but his was just type in Vince Vitale and RZIM, Rev Zacharias International Ministries, and you'll see he's got a talk on there. It's really great.
Yeah, I think those would be great ways for people to start conversations that matter.
All right, so if you want to connect with us, again, text Stay Bold to 51555. And if you want to pray for us, we're going on our East Coast tour this summer. Actually, next week we're leaving, and we're going to be going up for a few weeks up the East Coast, Manhattan, Washington, D.C., other places along the way. We're just going to start, we're going to be interviewing people, talking to them, YouTubing it, and we're going to just show you that conversations are fairly easy to have, and people want to have them in a lot of cases. And they really, just like you said, Pastor Bill, there's something missing that they don't have, and we can provide it. So peace be with you. Adios. Till next time.
Listening to WAFGLP 107.1 FM, Pompano Beach.
It's 7:59. We're